Hello, everybody. My name is Gregge Stewart, and welcome to the Gregge Stewart Show. Today, we have an amazing topic. What do you do when your heart has been broken? What do you do when you're grieving in a relationship that you thought was going to be forever, and unfortunately, it just didn't go that way? So, you're going to feel. There's no question about it. But sometimes we also have support systems that they're there, but they really are not there. And I understand that sometimes that person wants to only hear so much, or they give you advice and you feel like you're not taking it because it's difficult. Unless they're in that position, they really don't know. And that's where journaling comes in. So I would take notes in reference to what my colleagues are going to break down as well as myself. But one of the key things of any kind of grief is to have a journal, write down how you feel. And then we're going to utilize other concepts that you can use in your journal to get you through those areas of where you're feeling that sense of loss. Coming up now on the Gregge Stewart Show. But before we go there, please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Now, enjoy the show.
Today, we're getting into the real science of emotional healing after past relationships. Specifically, why heartbreak hits the way it does at a biological level, what boundaries actually do for your sense of self, and how the research shows that personal growth after a breakup is not just possible, it's measurable. By the end of this episode, you'll have a clearer picture of what's happening in your body and brain and some genuinely actionable ways to move forward. Joining me is someone who's dug deep into all of this. Let's get into it. So, I want to start with something that I think a lot of people dismiss as being dramatic: the physical pain of a breakup.
It is completely real, and the research on this is pretty striking. Neuroscientist Ethan Kross and his colleagues used neuroimaging to study people who were looking at photos of former partners who had rejected them. And what they found was that the brain regions activated by social rejection and romantic loss overlap substantially with the regions activated by physical pain. Specifically, the secondary somatosensory cortex and the dorsal posterior insula.
Wait, so the same part of the brain that processes a broken arm is processing a broken heart?
Exactly. The phrase heartbreak is not metaphorical. At the neural level, it is physical pain. And then there's Helen Fisher's research at Rutgers, which found that when recently rejected people view photos of their ex, the brain's dopamine reward circuitry and pain regions activate simultaneously. So you're getting hit with craving and pain at the same time.
That's a brutal combination.
It really is. And it makes sense when you understand what romantic love actually does to your brain chemistry. It involves elevated dopamine, that's reward and anticipation, oxytocin, which is bonding, and in long-term relationships, your stress response systems actually recalibrate around this specific person. Your nervous system learns to co-regulate with them. So when the relationship ends, it's not just emotional loss, it's abrupt withdrawal from all of that simultaneously.
So when people say they feel like they're going through withdrawal after a breakup, they're not being over-dramatic, they're being accurate.
They're being accurate. According to Simply Psychology, the symptoms in that acute phase, the intrusive thoughts you can't stop, the physical chest pain, the sleep disruption, the loss of appetite, the mood swings, those are neurobiological withdrawal symptoms. They don't mean you're weak, they mean your nervous system is in genuine dysregulation.
I think that reframe alone is really valuable because so many people beat themselves up for not being over it faster or for feeling like it's affecting them more than it should.
And that self-judgment actually makes recovery harder. The research is pretty clear that emotional suppression doesn't eliminate grief. It delays and complicates it.
And when it comes to withdrawal, they're absolutely right. We have stages, and this way it takes time. You have anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. Acceptance of how you're going to move forward. And this is why it's important to write things down, to write down those feelings. When you get angry, write it down. When you're bargaining, please bring that person back in my life. Don't cut yourself short. You're worth it. You're worthy. You are of value. Even though depression is going to come in, remember, emotion is created by physical motion. So if you're just sitting there, depression is going to take over, anxiety is going to take over, and all those emotions that go bump in the night. It's when you start moving and you show your body and teach your body to live, that acceptance comes back to you and you're able to move forward.
Simply Psychology puts it directly: allow the grief. Cry, journal, talk. The processing has to happen.
So let's talk about the stages of recovery, because I know people want a roadmap. Is there one?
There is a general arc, though it's important to say up front that it's not perfectly linear. People oscillate, revisit stages, and progress at different rates. But the research identifies phases: shock and denial, acute grief, renegotiation, and integration. And what Simply Psychology identifies as the central psychological task of the whole process is self-redefinition.
Self-redefinition. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means rebuilding a sense of who you are independent of the relationship. Because here's the thing, NeuroLaunch points out that the loss of a relationship forces a restructuring of self-concept, not just emotional grief. Your identity becomes entangled with a partner. So when the relationship ends, you're not just grieving the person, you're grieving a version of yourself.
That's actually a really important distinction. It's not just about missing them, it's about not knowing who you are without them.
Exactly.
One thing I want to focus on, though, is when you do have a support system, or whoever it may be in your life that you're discussing your breakup with, people do this even when they finally are over the person, and that person in some context comes up, they emphasize that person in reference to, oh, my ex broke up with me, my heart is broken. They'll also emphasize down the road, oh, I ran into my ex, or my ex used to do that. Here's one thing I want you to know. You are still claiming that person in your mind and heart. Now, granted, if you still have feelings, it makes sense to say my ex, but if you really are divorcing yourself from that person and you want to move on, one of the key aspects is to remember to utilize not saying mine. Your brain doesn't know the difference. When it hears mine, that's my food, that's my money, this is my house. So when you put it in that category, it knows to keep that person somehow in your life. A program that you might have watched. I used to watch this with my ex, or we used to go to this restaurant. It's so coincidental that I'm sitting at the same table that me and my ex used to basically sit at. So you're still claiming that person somewhere, and it makes it difficult, even when you are involved in another relationship, to move forward with your life without having that person in some context still living within you. And that's a PTSD, because you're going to remember the things that overwhelmed you, that triggered, or what that person did to you. So one to grow on and keep that in your mind, because it's not only that relationship, but it could be a working relationship, it could be a family member. Remember, when you claim mine, you're still owning it.
And that's why recovery takes longer than most people expect. You're not just processing loss, you're rebuilding an identity. And that work, the deeper processing, is what happens in months 1 through 3, after the acute intensity starts to decrease. That's when journaling, therapy, and honest conversations with trusted people become most productive.
And what about the no contact thing? Because that comes up constantly and people have really strong feelings about it.
The research and clinical experience consistently support it, at least in the acute phase. Here's why. Every contact restarts the neurochemical reset. And checking an ex's social media, even just looking, reactivates that craving and reward circuit. Psychology Today puts it pretty bluntly: your brain and body may tell you that you miss them and should be with them again. Don't believe it. This is one time when you know better than your biology.
That's a wild way to put it. You know better than your biology.
It is, but it's accurate. The attachment bond keeps pulling you back even when the relationship was harmful. And that's especially true in toxic relationships, where the cycle of highs and lows actually strengthens the attachment. The unpredictability of reward, which behavioral psychology shows creates the strongest attachment, is exactly what makes those relationships so hard to leave.
Okay, so let's pivot to something that I think is underrated in these conversations: boundaries. Because I feel like the word gets thrown around a lot, but people don't always understand what it actually means or why it matters so much after a relationship.
Yeah, and the misconception is that boundaries are about keeping people out, like you're building a wall. But Help Guide describes them as an important ingredient in healthy, balanced relationships, not a barrier to connection. They're a crucial part of maintaining your identity, mental health, and physical well-being.
So what do they actually do?
According to Help Guide, healthy boundaries encourage autonomy and reduce codependent habits, set expectations for how people interact with you, give you a sense of empowerment and self-respect, ensure your physical and emotional comfort, and clarify individual responsibilities in a relationship. They separate your wants, needs, thoughts, and feelings from those of others.
And here's what I find really interesting about this. Psych Hub makes the point that clear boundaries actually make people more likely to let others get close. Because when the rules of engagement are clear, you can be more open. It's almost counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive, and it's one of the most important things to understand about boundaries. They're not the opposite of intimacy. They're what makes genuine intimacy possible. When you don't have them, relationships become toxic and unsatisfying, and your well-being suffers.
That is correct, that your well-being does suffer. And that's why one of the things that I always have my clients do is invest on Amazon, Walmart, Walgreens, wherever, but get a magnetic dry erase board. This way you get to see the person you wish to become after this breakup. Place it where you know you're going to go. So I have one on my refrigerator, and I write, I draw a stickman if I can't draw, what have you, but I put a vision board, which we also call in clinical meditation as future pacing. Where do I see myself now? Because just like with food, you are what you eat, you are what you think. So one of the key aspects is I start painting the picture of where I'm going. It's like watching someone give me advice for an affirmation or an incantation. So it's important to have something that you can now not familiarize with, so become familiar, because you're used to the familiar from your past. And a lot of people will say to me all the time, it's been 6 months, it's been 7 months, because they didn't create a vision board. They're living in the past. And how I know this is because they emphasize on, I can't stop thinking about this person. I always find myself thinking and claiming again, my ex. So I said two things. This person's no longer in your life, and everything you're saying is not thinking. Thinking is living now and moving forward, future pacing. You're doing remembrance because that person's no longer here. So you're remembering them, and it's stirring up all of those feelings. So the vision board will help you and change it. Post pictures of where do you want to see yourself. I'm going to go into the gym more now. I'm going to take more walks. I'm going to become more social. I'm going to make more money. Start emphasizing where you want to go. Don't let this person still continue to control you. Even though they're not in your life, they're living just fine here. So homework, journal, yes. Vision board also. If you don't journal, at least you're seeing the vision board. It future paces you. It connects a feeling. You hear the voices in your head. Start building a positive future.
Help Guide gives a really relatable example. Feeling taken advantage of when a friend keeps asking for money, or feeling overwhelmed when you feel like you have to solve all of your partner's emotional problems.
And that exhaustion is real. There's actually a study on this. A 2020 study on workers in the Netherlands found that when boundaries between personal life and work are blurred, people experience greater emotional exhaustion and less happiness. And on the flip side, setting boundaries around job duties led to a greater sense of empowerment.
Which shows that the boundary setting skills you develop after a relationship don't just apply to romance. They ripple into every area of your life. Work, family, friendships. It's a transferable skill.
Okay, so let's get into the growth side of this. Because I think there's a tendency to frame breakups as purely loss. But the research suggests something more complicated is happening.
Much more complicated. There's a University of Virginia longitudinal study published in the journal Emerging Adulthood by researchers Jessica Kansky and Joseph Allen that followed 160 participants from ages 20 to 25 with a breakup assessed at age 22. And what they found is genuinely striking.
What did they find?
People who had a greater understanding of the reasons for their breakup showed lower internalizing symptoms, so less depression and anxiety, relative decreases in romantic conflict in future relationships, and relative increases in relationship satisfaction and what they called intimate relationship competence. Basically, understanding why your relationship ended makes you measurably better at future relationships.
So the insight you gain from a breakup is literally predictive of how your next relationship goes.
That's exactly what the data shows. And there's a separate study published in the Psych-Reg Journal of Psychology, researchers Tyrone and Ursu from the University of Sutiva, that looked at 98 emerging adults with an average age of about 25. They found a positive, significant correlation between social support and personal growth following a breakup. The more connected you are, the more you grow.
And that tracks with what Simply Psychology says about social connection, that time with people you trust is neurobiologically regulatory. It's not just comfort, it's medicine.
Exactly. And the same Psych-Reg study found negative significant correlations between depression and anxiety and personal growth. So the more you're struggling with depression and anxiety, the less personal growth you report. Which means addressing your mental health isn't separate from growing, it's the prerequisite.
Let's talk about toxic relationships specifically, because I think that's a different beast. When the relationship itself was harmful, the recovery looks different, right?
It does. And there's a really important reframe here from licensed marriage and family therapist Figs O'Sullivan. He argues that after a toxic relationship, your self-esteem didn't just take a hit. It was systematically dismantled by a relational dynamic that hijacked your nervous system's survival wiring.
Systematically dismantled. That's a strong phrase.
It is, and he's deliberate about it. Because if you think your self-esteem simply got damaged the way a car gets a dent, you'll try to fix it with affirmations and positive self-talk. And O'Sullivan's clinical argument is that those tools, while not useless, are completely insufficient for what actually happened biologically. He says, rebuilding self-esteem after a toxic relationship is not a mindset project. It is a nervous system reclamation project.
A nervous system reclamation project. That's a completely different way of thinking about it.
And it changes what recovery actually looks like. It's not about thinking more positively. It's about understanding what happened to your sense of self at a biological level and then doing the work to reclaim it, which is slower, more embodied, and requires more support than most people expect.
And Psychology Today makes the point that toxic patterns are unlikely to change as a relationship continues. If change is going to happen, it happens when each person heals and grows individually. Leaving is often the only way that can occur for either partner.
Which is a really important thing to hold on to when you're in the middle of it and hoping things will get better. The research doesn't support waiting it out. It supports leaving and doing the individual work.
There's also something worth noting about attachment style here. NeuroLaunch points out that your attachment style, whether you're secure, anxious, or avoidant, strongly predicts how you experience and recover from a breakup. And a lot of that gets shaped by earlier experiences.
Right. And Psychology Today has written about how unresolved earlier trauma, not just from romantic relationships, affects adult attachment, trust, and communication in intimate relationships. The emotional blueprint you carry into adulthood gets shaped by experiences you may not even consciously connect to your current relationships.
So it's not just about the relationship that ended, it's about the whole pattern you've been carrying.
Exactly. And that's actually where therapy becomes most valuable, not just for processing the specific breakup, but for understanding the patterns that led you there and that might lead you somewhere similar again if left unexamined. Simply, psychology frames the processing phase as asking not just, I miss them, but what did this relationship mean to me about myself? And what patterns in me contributed to the dynamic?
That's a harder question to sit with.
It is, but it's the question that actually moves you forward. And it's the question that the University of Virginia research suggests is predictive of better outcomes. Understanding the reasons, not just accepting the loss, but genuinely making sense of it, is what changes the trajectory.
I want to come back to something you said earlier about social connection being medicine. Because I think in the aftermath of a relationship, especially a long one, people often find that their social network has shrunk. They pulled away from friends, and then they're trying to heal in isolation.
And Psychology Today addresses this directly. They say it's okay if you pulled away from your friends during the relationship. Reach back out now. Some will be there, and they will love you and support you. The research on breakup recovery identifies social connection as one of the most evidence-backed predictors of faster and more complete healing, alongside meaning-making and deliberate self-investment.
Deliberate self-investment. What does that look like?
It's intentional investment in your own growth, your goals, your interests, your identity outside of the relationship. Exercise is one concrete example. Simply Psychology calls it one of the most effective interventions for the neurobiological distress of heartbreak. Daily movement significantly reduces the acute intensity. But it's also broader than that. It's about rebuilding a life that feels like yours.
And there's something interesting here from the Harvard Grant Study, one of the longest-running longitudinal studies in psychology, initiated in 1938, tracking 268 men for over 75 years. One of its findings is about the lasting impact of relationships formed in the first half of our lives. They shape our emotional and social development in ways that persist.
Which is a reminder that the relationships we go through, even the ones that end painfully, are not wasted. They're formative. They contribute to who we become. The question is whether we process them consciously or let them run in the background, shaping our choices without our awareness.
That's a really useful way to think about it. The relationship isn't wasted, but the growth is only guaranteed if you do the work.
Exactly. And the PsychReg Journal study found significant differences in depression, anxiety, stress, and personal growth based on participant status related to the ending of the relationship, whether they knew the reasons, whether they had social support, whether they had a prospective partner. The variables that predict growth are all things you have some agency over.
Let's talk about what actually helps in a practical sense, because I think people want to know, what do I do with this?
The evidence-based strategies that NeuroLaunch highlights are cognitive behavioral therapy, social reconnection, and structured no-contact periods. CBT helps you identify and change distorted beliefs, the stories you're telling yourself about what the relationship meant, about your worth, about what you deserve. Social reconnection addresses the neurobiological need for co-regulation, and no contact gives your nervous system the space to reset.
And on the boundaries front, Help Guide has a pretty practical framework. Know what you want, talk to the person, enforce the boundaries, and learn how to respond when they're tested.
And that last part, learning how to respond, is where a lot of people struggle. Because enforcing a boundary isn't a one-time event, it's an ongoing practice. Especially when you're dealing with someone who's used to you not having them.
And positive psychology makes the point that boundaries are interpersonal limits shaped by personality, culture, and context. They're not one size fits all. What's appropriate in one relationship or context might be completely different in another.
Right. And that's actually a sign of emotional maturity, being able to calibrate your boundaries to the relationship and the context, rather than having a rigid script. The goal is self-awareness, clear communication, and respect. That's how positive psychology frames it.
I want to ask you something that might be a bit of a counterpoint, because there's a version of this conversation that can feel like, okay, just do the work, set the boundaries, grow from it. But what about people who are genuinely struggling, where the breakup has crossed into something that looks more like trauma?
That's a really important question to raise. NeuroLaunch addresses this directly. In severe cases, romantic rejection can cause measurable trauma symptoms. And Psychology Today notes that adults with a history of unresolved trauma may suffer from depression, PTSD, anxiety, substance use disorder, and eating disorders. So there's a real spectrum here, and for some people, professional support isn't optional.
And BetterHelp makes the point that friends and family, no matter how much they want to help, may not have the expertise to support you through all aspects of leaving a toxic relationship. There are limits to what your support network can do.
Exactly. And that's not a failure of your support network. It's just an honest acknowledgement that some of this work requires professional guidance. Therapy, whether CBT, EMDR for trauma processing, or other modalities, can address things that journaling and social connection alone can't reach.
So when you step back from everything we've covered, the neuroscience, the stages, the boundaries, the growth data, what's the through line here?
The through line is that healing after a relationship is a real, biological, psychological process with predictable patterns, and that the outcomes are not random. The research is pretty consistent. The people who heal most completely are the ones who allow the grief, seek social connection, make meaning from what happened, and invest deliberately in rebuilding their identity. Those aren't soft suggestions. They're evidence-backed predictors.
And the boundaries piece connects directly to that identity rebuilding, because you can't know what you need to protect until you know who you are.
That's exactly it. Help Guide says boundaries are a crucial part of maintaining your identity, mental health, and physical well-being. They're not something you set once and forget. They're an ongoing expression of self-respect. And after a relationship, especially a difficult one, learning to set and hold them is part of how you reclaim yourself.
And the University of Virginia research gives me a lot of hope here, because it shows that the insight you gain from a breakup, actually understanding what happened and why, is predictive of lower conflict, higher satisfaction, and better relationship competence going forward. The pain isn't pointless if you do something with it.
And that's the thing about post-traumatic growth, which NeuroLaunch identifies as a real phenomenon after breakups. It's not that the pain was worth it in some abstract sense. It's that the processing of the pain is what creates the growth. You can't skip the processing and get the growth. They're the same thing.
Here's what this really comes down to, I think. Your brain treated that relationship like a substance. The withdrawal was real, the pain was physical, and the recovery, the actual measurable recovery, depends on three things the research keeps pointing back to: making sense of what happened, staying connected to people who support you, and investing in who you are outside of that relationship.
And I'd add, being honest about what kind of support you actually need. Because for some people, the work is journaling and therapy and time. For others, especially after toxic relationships, it's a deeper nervous system reclamation that requires professional help. Knowing the difference is itself a form of self-respect.
So here's something to sit with after this episode. The next time you catch yourself checking an ex's social media at midnight and you know who you are, remember that every check is literally restarting a neurochemical reset. Your biology is pulling you back. But the research says you know better than your biology. And that knowledge, that's where the healing actually starts.